Hello, everyone. Dropping in. It's awesome that you are making the time to join us today. Join me, Joana, and Danielle. We'll start in a second. Let everyone settle in. This is not your typical Teams or Zoom hangout, so get familiar with the full screen experience. And then we can get started. While we get started, before we introduce the topic and get into it, everyone who already is here, who are seeing the chat, Sufiana, Donna, hello, Simon. My daughter is called Donna, by the way. Nice name. Jason, Sven, great to see you all. Everyone, please let us know, where are you calling in from? Where in the world are you right now? From Vienna, Raymond, hello. Netherlands, Finland, Ontario, Argentina. There we go. We almost got around the world. Budapest, Toronto, Morocco, Zurich. Oh, it's going too fast to keep up. Hello, everyone. Virginia, go Virginia. Stockholm. Jason from Northern California. Good morning to you. Thank you for calling in. Everyone, welcome. Give it another few seconds for everyone to settle in before we can get started with maybe the last webinar that you're visiting this year. Maybe not. Who will know? But it's my job to make it a great one, a memorable one. So I think we should get into it. So the journey management wave came out, which is awesome. Obviously, if you're a journey management company like ours. But today, we're actually going to take a piece of that. And I've invited Joana, who I'll introduce in a second, from Forrester, who did the wave, and then Daniel from Lufthansa today to talk with me about delivering ROI-based journey management for enterprise organizations. So I want to bring the analytical perspective from Forrester together on the customer journey management market at large, but also provide a peek into what it means to be successful implementing journey management and scaling that up, but also be clear about what works, what doesn't work, and give that space for us to learn from. Obviously, we are helping the world realize the potential of journey management, but it's not so much about TheyDo today. It's really about Joana and Daniel and about you. Because as you found the chat, which is great, there's also a place for us to do Q&A and put all your questions there so that I can use them in the last part of today's webinar where we go through the audience questions, because I really want to hear from you. And Joana and Daniel are so kind to answer all your questions. I don't know, maybe asterisk all, because usually we have more questions than we can answer in the time. So apologies ahead if we can do it. But we promise to make it worthwhile and tackle as many as we can. So without further ado, let me reintroduce my guests for those who haven't heard from them before, who do not know them yet. So first of all, Joana de Quintanilha, she's the VP Principal Analyst at Forrester. And she's obviously leading the customer journey management practice. And I've came to know her as one of the most forward journey-centric thinkers in our customer experience space at large, period. She obviously advises customer experience leaders, but more and more so business leaders, on how to move from journey mapping to actually managing journeys at scale, and also taking Forrester's research to their clients. And I'm sure many of you are actively talking to her, have had her advice, or are in a consulting cycle with Forrester at large. So little background, she used to be at Elsevier, where she built and ran a journey-led insights practice. And that mix of analyst rigor, but also hands-on operator experiences is what I think is making her perspective so valuable. So Joana, thank you for joining me again on a webinar.
Thank you so much for having me. And I'm excited to have this conversation.
Yes, same here. And we also brought someone you know already, but my guest might not know today, into the mix, which is Daniel Hoffmann. Daniel, you're leading the service design practice at Lufthansa Group, and you're responsible for the journey management practice in the Digital Hangar. We're going to go into what that means in practice in a second. But what I like about how you're approaching it is that over the last 15 years, first at ING, now at Lufthansa, you've been a big proponent of turning customer insight and business impact together and trying to drive this transformation from the inside of the organization. I mean, if there's someone who's lived the pain of those journeys hanging on the wall, which we've been very vocal about, to, without action, to then bring them into the company and tie different value streams together, where teams used to work in silos, but now starting to have that shared perspective on what is important? How do we show up to our customers? How do we actually impact not only their lives, but also the Lufthansa business KPIs as we care about them? So I'm very happy that you could join us today. Very much welcome to you.
Yeah, thanks a lot for the great introduction. Thanks for having me on my favorite topic. Great to speak with you guys here.
Yeah, it's my job to make it a very engaging session, and I've prepared a couple of jumping off points for the conversation today. For those expecting like TheyDo demos, that's for another time. I really want to dig into the ROI on journey management and getting like those two perspectives in. Your questions, again, drop them in the chat. We'll make sure that all of them are listed and I have enough time to go through them. If you want to have that question directed at a specific person, Daniel or Joana or me or all of us, if that is possible, just let us know as we go. So yeah, I have to get into like the basics to really set us up for today. The Journey Management Wave came out. Joana has done a rigorous process to get that wave done and do a proper unbiased analysis on the whole space, which is awesome. So one episode on how that actually comes together you can find on the Forrester CX cast, which I think is a great primer on the topic. If you haven't listened to that, please do. So I will not go into like the mechanics of like how the evaluation goes, but I really want to talk about the ROI. And maybe like the first question to set us up, Joana, is where vendors actually misunderstand how Forrester evaluates journey management. So rather than talk about the mechanics themselves, like what are some of the misconceptions around the wave that you commonly see? So we're all on the same page to get started today.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, well, let me start with the biggest misconception, which is, in fact, one of the reasons why we renamed this wave recently. So in previous iterations, this wave was called the Journey Mapping Wave. And in this latest evaluation that we did, we renamed it as Customer Journey Management Platforms. And we did that for a very explicit reason, because we felt that the vendors in this space were had changed fundamentally, and what companies want to do with these tools had changed fundamentally. So one of the misconceptions that we have is that the way that we evaluate the platforms in this wave is still focused on mapping, when it's not. It's very much focused on how do you actually manage journeys? How do you use the insights about your journeys to drive action, to improve journeys, to measure the impact of that, to coordinate work within your organization and systems in your organization in order to do so much more than just map journeys, which is really to drive action and to drive impact and co-create value for your customers and for your company by focusing on journeys as one of the fundamental ways in which we can actually become more customer-centric. So that's probably the biggest misconception, comes from the renaming of the wave and the focus on a very broad set of criteria that really focus on helping companies drive a journey-centric strategy in a way that is impactful for customers and for them as a business and drives business results. So that's probably the biggest clarification that's required.
Nice. I love that. And basically what you're also saying is that it was very hard to quantify the ROI of journey mapping as a standalone thing. But now that we're actually seeing like, oh, being journey led or journey oriented or journey centric, as you call it, you're actually able to continuously create that value for the business, prove the ROI. Like obviously, like that's a topic we need to go into. Like when you assess ROI, like what evidence actually changes your confidence in a vendor versus what sounds good but doesn't necessarily move the needle? Like how did you assess that in the journey management way?
Yeah, so there's a couple of criteria that we assess very explicitly to focus on that ROI, the continuous improvement and the ROI impact. So we have a criteria explicitly about business impact and ROI. So we look at how is that quantified within the tool? Are there cost-benefit analyses? Can you layer journeys with metrics? Can you trace them back to the impact? Can you look at the action that you've driven for a journey and assess the impact that's had on important metrics, key metrics, not just Net Promoter Score, but think about things like the cost of the journey, the impact on conversion, on retention, on other business metrics. So we have a specific criteria that looks at business impact and ROI, but we also look more broadly at things like, is the tool driving cross-functional collaboration, which we know is so essential to actually driving value for customer and for company, right? So not only can you map a journey, can you identify opportunities, but can you share those with stakeholders within the organization who you need to collaborate with in order to actually make that happen. We look at integrations, for instance, with systems, right? And it might be other systems where you're measuring the impact of the journey, or systems where you track the progress of actions that you want to drive from the analysis that you've done on your journey. So there's different aspects to measuring, quantifying the impact and the ROI of those journeys, some of which are more about the internal mechanics of it, some of which are about the scale of the work that you can do. That's also a really important one. And others are focused very specifically at how do you bring business impact measurement into the platform, and how effective is that? Can you adapt it to what you as an organization consider to be valuable? Because that's not the same for every organization. So the ability to adjust that is also super important, and one of the things that we look at. And I'll mention one more, of course, which is AI, right? How is AI accelerating some of that measurement, or helping you to turn the analysis that you've done on your journeys into executive-ready presentations so that you can get buy-in for the work that you're doing, so that you can tell stories about the impact that you're hopefully driving from that analysis.
I will put a pin in AI. I'm sure we're going to talk about that in a second, but maybe over to you, Daniel. Like, the first time that you started to bring journey management, not necessarily a platform, but like the idea of journey management to Lufthansa, like that's quite a while ago. But maybe like walk us through, like, what was the actual problem that you were trying to solve at first hand, or like what was the problem Lufthansa was to solve? I mean, your problem was maybe like get away from like journey maps hanging on the wall, but what was the problem that got the teams hooked, or got the ultimate people that made the decision to greenlight this hooked? Like, what was that like?
I would say the initial impulse was really the tremendous amount of customer feedback we get every day. Now, through various channels and platforms on the physical space, in the digital space, all these kinds of channels. So it's really a massive amount of customer feedback we get every day. And so really, I think one of the key points was really in the first place, how can we make this more manageable? How can we process basically more feedback to really get to insights, to really think about customer-centric opportunities, so to say. And especially in an like really traditional metrics organization, and where so to say really in an agency set up a lot, so not that much UX stuff, and also not that UX mature in the whole design space with user research, insights, and the customer-centric way of working. So this was really the big point where we thought, okay, and then of course in the service design practice we tried out multiple formats and tools, how to bring that to the people, also throughout the whole organization. So from multiple business units, we set together on a regular basis with service designers and designers how to make that happen. And we really had the best results, and everybody agreed on this basically, really with journey mapping exercises. Like, and even it was a full day journey mapping exercise with management and whatnot from different roles, bringing their data, bringing their assumptions together, and then really work and feel that customer-centric way of working. That's okay, we are using actual feedback and deriving insights out of it. And so that was really something that worked pretty well in comparison also to other formats, which were sometimes a bit more tricky and these kind of things. And I think that was really a door opener then to the whole topic, where we thought about, okay, how can we make that scalable? And then I think we are talking a lot about the things Joana just mentioned. So how can we make that scalable? How can we automate things? How can we bring our feedbacks more easily in? How can we really make these kind of things really living? So talking about living customer journey maps, that was a bit the term back in the days. Ooh, that sounds super old. But so yeah, I think that was really the door opener to this, okay, journey management as a next step on an existing good working tool, basically. That sounded super promising.
When you think about the way others outside of your customer-centric organization, right, whether it's service design or UX, perceive the initial value, like were there specific critical moments where like moved people from being skeptical towards, hey, this is actually the way forward? Like I can imagine like being able to process all that feedback is one thing, but then still the question is like, okay, so now we have better insights. So what are we going to do with that? So were there like specific points in time where you say like, this was a clear moment of value that was like for everyone in your organization, critical to see? Or was it more like a gradual slope? Like, are there any specific moments that come to mind?
I think it was gradual, definitely, but with some key moments, of course. And I think definitely one key moment was clearly our pilot phase. I think that was really then specifically on TheyDo that we tried out the tool. But I think that is not really TheyDo specific in that sense, but really to show how journey management, what is the difference, so to say, to your journey map on the wall? And really, what is, so to say, what is journey management? What is the management component enabling, so to say, on top on what everybody knows from journey mapping, so to say? And I think that was really key that we decided for such a pilot phase where we said, okay, hey, let's try it really out with our data. Let's see our customers' feedback and journey, basically. Of course, just a handful to get it started. Instead of using some demo materials or someone coming in demonstrating stuff, things like that. So that was really the point, saying, hey, we will try it out and we show it to our people, basically, because I think the first positive introduction of the topic, so that everybody felt, yeah, there might be something in for us. So of course, that opened the door for for such a POC or pilot phase. I think that was a key moment where really, or even leadership showed then some of the evidence and the goals we reached, and this is really that it really worked like they expected, and that we really were able to process a lot of data, that we now have a negative comment tracker in place with such a tool. So, and I think that is really the key point, is that people understand the potential. So I think there's not this one enabling win, basically, but then everybody says, yes, we have now a much better conversion rate, let's do journey management. That's probably not the thing. So, but make people understand, oh yes, this can work for us, this really brings value, and there's really potential for even more different things we can tackle with it. I think this is to bring that over. I think that is the key moment, that people get this feeling, because then you can work on more of these moments.
Yeah, we underestimate how often it is. You mentioned feeling, right? But it is a gut reaction to seeing the data come to life, where it's like, okay, clear. Now I understand it. Now I need to see the next steps from that. So, Joana, looking at all the vendors and all the customers of the vendors that you've talked to, and most interesting about the customers, where do you see like patterns in how people recognize the value? And the reason I'm asking this is that for Daniel, it was that case, right? And I know another story that was public, where the ancillary team was able to craft a customer-centric roadmap for this year, right? Which ends almost. For when you're a utilities company, it might be like, oh, we have an invoice payment ratio problem in billing, and we need to understand like where the friction in the experience is, so that we can basically collect the cash that we have the right to redeem in the first go, which is a huge benefit to us. So what I'm trying to say is like value realization means so many different things for so many different customers. So I'm curious, like, did you find any patterns that were recurring specifically on seeing value from implementing journey management?
Yeah, so things that we heard often from customers were, so there's, I was able to quantify what the biggest pain points were in a journey, right? So that I could very clearly get buy-in from stakeholders, because now it's not just a journey map that tells a story, but it's actually, I can quantify which one should I prioritize first? What would be the impact of actually fixing this? I could quantify the amount of work, for instance, and that could be tasks in a JIRA system have been delivered in order to impact a journey. And now I can see that has moved the needle on CSAT, on Net Promoter Score, or on the cost of the journey, or on the amount of channel switches, right? It depends. Some of it requires blending maybe more familiar metrics with more leading indicators of success in a journey. So the ability to connect more of those metrics to the journey and also tell that story, that more quantifiable story, but also be able to still tell that qualitative story, right? So you can actually tell a story that quantifies the significance of improving something or improving a particular pain point, and then also be able to say, and this is what customers are now telling us, right? Now that we've removed this friction or we've fixed this pain point. So that quantifying as well as being able to tell that more qualitative story together, I think is what I heard was impactful, connecting it to the action that was being taken to improve the journey. But I also heard, interestingly, I am now so much more confident in articulating why we are focusing on certain things in the journey. So it's both about being able to quantify and the numbers and the metrics that we're using and being able to layer them onto the journey maps, being able to prioritize things based on how valuable they are. But it's also about a level of confidence as a CX professional or a product manager that you can bring to a conversation when you can have that kind of when you can tell that story that is more data driven, that is more fact based. So I think that's the real difference that I think it makes for the customers that we spoke to.
Yeah, are you also seeing a shift in terms of who is actually in the context of running a journey-centric operation being involved? Because I know, for instance, you've been publisher of, you have score-based organizations that are backward looking, right? It's customer experience teams doing surveys and analyzing them and reporting out, and that's it. And then there's a growing group of a broader function in customer experience where journey centricity obviously lands, but then we're seeing Daniel, who's from service design, we're seeing experience design, we're seeing product management, we're seeing data people coming together. So curious, like what have you seen shift in the comparison between like the journey mapping wave and the journey management wave?
Yeah, absolutely. So we see a much broader set of stakeholders being involved in journey management. By nature, that has to be the case, right? So you're typically talking about cross-functional journey teams. So you have representatives from digital, from different channels, from insights, from legal, from compliance, right? So you've got a much diverser set of stakeholders that can be brought into the fold when they're collaborating on improving these journeys and can benefit from those journey insights. So one of the things that we saw that is really important, for instance, the usability of the platform is incredibly important, remains so, to make it accessible to both technical as well as business users, but also the ability to share insights from the platform into other systems, whether it's agile systems or it's design systems. Why? Because you have this growing number of stakeholders in design, in product, in operations, in customer service that can benefit from these journey insights. Sort of separately to evaluating the platforms, I do a lot of work with companies who are in the process of transforming themselves to become what we call journey-centric. And what we see there is that companies that mature from a journey centricity point of view tend to see that their journey teams become more and more embedded in the operations of the organization, right? So they remain cross-functional. It's inherently cross-functional work, especially when you're talking about re-engineering sort of the structure of a journey. journey, right? So not automating things in a journey, but really sort of changing the nature of a journey. But we see that teams tend to become more and more embedded closer to the business, closer to where the P&L is as well within the business. So the number of stakeholders or the variety of stakeholders is increasing, but also how these teams work within the organization, I think, changes fundamentally as a result of the maturity.
Daniel, can you speak to this, like how that plays out at the Digital Hangar and Lufthansa, where you're from, and maybe like to bring that to life, like give an example of why journey management is bringing those different teams together and how that plays out in practice.
Yeah, but just saying super boring. I just can repeat what you just said, Joana, because this is so
we should give an example. Like what's going on? Like give an example of a team, a project, like an initiative, like that was better with journey management than without, and like who's involved? How does that go?
No, because I think first of all, and that was also, of course, it's super important help and push in the beginning also for our pilot project was, and I really wrote it down, that the confidence part you just mentioned. I think that was really crucial in our UX domain, that really this confidence to give, especially to our practitioners, so to say, to argue better really with the quantified number, with really showing the context and where are the different pain points are coming from. Why do we think they are really crucial? Where usually you, especially in the design space, you have your design files, you have your Miro boards, and this is basically then how you try to start a discussion with the business people with their dashboards and Excel files. So your chances are not the best. And so that was really, really great help. And I think this is really especially for our practitioner, a huge win, and how we are using it to really, really defend the decisions and our recommendations to go for certain opportunities we found in the insights, in the data. So I think that's definitely one big one. And then also really the connection, also what you said, the connection to different systems, to our operating systems like Jira. So you said really in going into the production space, because I think that is so crucial, and it's also what we started, I think, just half a year ago. We really start the closer collaboration with our agile teams and our COO domain, basically, to really, as we really learned, we are clashing a little bit with the way of working, with the traditional way of working, the traditional way how we make decisions, the traditional way how we fill backlogs. These kind of things, we really learned this is not fitting. We cannot throw journey management in and then think, hey, here's the opportunity. Why are we not doing this? Yeah, because this is not how we plan things. So this is really, it's not the time, it's not the channel, it's maybe not even like really the person, the team, the level, I don't know. Yeah. So there are so many difficulties. And then really to getting this picture together and understanding, okay, hey, where do we need to connect with and where do we need to integrate? And this was then clearly the COO domain, and with our agile coaches and our agile release train engineers. So this is really now what we're partnering with, and that we want to really integrate journey management in the way of working. And this is super crucial. So also really looking back, I think this is something we should have done at the day one, basically, to really get in touch with the way of working people and try how you can really align this way of working. So I think this is that was a second very, very important thing, or is still. So I think that's also on our list, big top one on 26 roadmap for us, so to say, to go the way of working route a bit better. I think that's the one. And then I think this is maybe a third great example coming from our research. So especially on research, that's another, or this is the group at the moment pushing TheyDo and really providing insights via journeys. So really in the context, get rid of your PDF reports, PowerPoint reports, single insight or number reports you're sending out from research, and then maybe people misinterpret your stuff, or they just look isolated at the one or the other number, so that they also really early in the process saw the benefit from research side, and so that we even have that's not directly in journey management, let's say, but that they really, and I think, Joachim, you were like talking about training the muscle early. So this is they play back the insights in the form of journeys. Even if teams are not using journey management, or they do at the moment, they are introducing it. They say, hey, these are the findings. This is the feedback from last week. And we show it in context. We show it along the journey around your products, basically, and people are then take it from there. And they not necessarily need to stay there or need to do a journey, but they're really working with these insights and decide what to do with it. We need more clarification here. Oh, that's new. Oh, we really need to fix that fast. And then they work from there. They even have some smaller workflows for that. But I'm pretty confident that we will get these teams sooner or later in journey management. And we see already the first wins here, very interested colleagues then. So that's another great example, I guess, how we bring it to life and really connect multiple roles with the tool and the methodology, let's say.
What is interesting about this is that I'm seeing two types of organizations. So one is they start heavy on like the governance, the workflow, and how we're going to do all these team rituals. The others, and I'm going to put you in that bucket if you don't mind, is starting with like, hey, where's the problems that we need to fix? Like, how do we bring insights to life so they actually get acted on, so we can see the true line on impacting, even though it's a part of the business and not the whole. That's fine. Like, and now 26, like you've been doing journey management for a couple of years. Now we're going to go and talk about the workflow. So I'm fascinated by that. I know there's also the benefits of having this journey-centric approach to understand where different teams are coming from. Maybe you can speak to that in a second, Daniel, because I want to go to Joana on the difference. Like, did that show up in your report as well? That there's like governance, workflow, ways of working led organizations versus the pragmatic ones where it's like, let's create some impact, let's earn our right to do more. Did you see that come through?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm a big believer that the two are in fact not mutually exclusive. They have to go hand in hand, right? So you have to do the two in parallel. You're often thinking about the governance, thinking about the journey hierarchy, taxonomy, and all of the things, all of the foundational things. And at the same time, you have to work also on pilots and build success stories in order to create the momentum, in order to be able to actually move forward in implementing that governance. So the two need to go hand in hand. So we absolutely spoke to companies that are at different levels of maturity, and some are still at that sort of bottom up, let's build a pilot, let's build a success story. And in parallel, they're trying to build buy-in for a broader transformation, if you like, and more governance and more structure and a more strategic approach. And we also spoke to companies that have perhaps a more top-down mandate, in which some of that thinking around what is the strategic approach to journeys is happening very much in parallel to pilots and success stories being built. But it is sort of a fundamental recommendation. I think you have to do the two things in parallel. You should be building pilots. You should be thinking about what are testable hypotheses in my journeys? How can I build success stories, right? Start small and start increasing those. But at the same time, in order not to get stuck in just building pilots or just finding and fixing sort of quick wins, you have to also be thinking more strategically in terms of what are the journeys that matter most? How are we going to prioritize them? How do we build the governance? How do we start to create or think about accountability for journeys? Because these questions are going to come up sooner or later, assuming that you're being successful in what you're doing, which of course I'm sure that that you are if you're pursuing journey management, and particularly if you have also a platform that maybe helps you accelerate some of that progress that you're making.
Could you speak to some of that in Lufthansa's case, Daniel, on how the accountability across teams that not necessarily were connected all of a sudden are connected through a journey because they realize, hey, we both serve the same customer in different ways? Can you speak to like how that materializes? Like, what are the conversations? What is the shift that is happening, or different behaviors that you're seeing? Like, how does that play out?
Yeah, first of all, I would definitely agree to the approach, or also the other way around. I'm happy to hear it also from you that I really think that is the way to go. And it's also what we needed to learn a little bit the hard way in the beginning, to be very honest. That we of course, you need a little setup of taxonomy, as you said. Yeah, you need a little taxonomy and some guidance to get it started. But of course, we tried really in the beginning to set up more, to think about the big structure, to think about, okay, how maybe the digital hangar is structured, and then how the group itself is structured, and then maybe Miles and More is fitting in. And we made a lot of, because we had this initial, let's call it buying group, where we had multiple entities buying also in the tool, and then we sat together, and of course, to get started, align the taxonomy, make it transparent to each other, make it shareable cross business units. And so we did a lot of these high level taxonomy and playbook stuff, let's say. But you then really learned quickly in the practice, it's not accelerating like that fast, or it's not trickling down that fast that people are really like waiting for our solution in journey management and to get finally started with the playbook. So that was really also the time where we did really a full stop and said, okay, we have now a basic taxonomy, we have a basic structure, and now we need really to get the people in. And this was then really the case when we worked with UX, where we worked with the researchers, we worked with the first teams, we initiated the one or the other sprint formats. We even called it a Trojan horse sprint. As we said, don't call it journey management. It's a business challenge sprint. We are solving a business challenge here for you. And as a nice extra on the side, you will get the picture perfect journey map with all the findings on our way solving your business challenge. So to get people into that way of thinking and work in the first place, and then maybe even make them stick, so to say, in our journey management. So this is then also really the collaboration and to bring people together in these sessions again. So that is then technically a little bit going more into the journey mapping exercise traditionally. So we send everybody out, get their data and insights and questions, bring it back to the table. Then, for example, this ancillary example you brought up, Jochen, I think that was a very good example where just really bringing the people together, because we saw some friction in the data. It's like, ooh, numbers are not good here. What's going on? And maybe we need to fix something. Let's have a look. And just by really looking in the context and going a little bit broader on the topic with our DAs, digital analysts, with our insights, and so on, even before the mapping exercise, people figured out the reason why the number is not good. And it was not because of the product or the feature of these ancillary teams was bad, but because others were influencing basically the sales funnel for quite some time. And so that in the end saved a lot of money, that people were not going for a solution or calling the agency or, I don't know, spending a full quarter on finding some solutions for a problem which was not existing. So bringing the people together in that context already, don't call it journey management, was already great success. And I think this is the dynamic we want to see more. And I think this also really also from leadership, the dynamics they want to see more, connecting the silos on the personal level, basically. I mean, you're not connecting physical silos, you're connecting people, basically. And this is, I think, exactly what we are doing here. And I think it's really well perceived by everybody. Also really, especially also in the teams which are working then in these formats.
Yeah. ROI, like return on investment, is often seen as we put a euro in and we get a euro or two out. But what you're describing is the value, right? That's the value realization. It's saying without journey management, I'm even talking about tooling, but like without the approach to being journey centric, that team would have come to their own conclusions, would have initiated like all the unnecessary work to solve a problem that didn't exist, because if they looked upstream in the broader journey, in the broader experience, they saw there wasn't a problem. It was just a different team that brought a solution that influence their numbers, and that's it. I think you don't need to say more, right? If people want to know the ROI of journey management, like preventing from corporate waste, if I may put it that way, I hope I don't offend people, but like, that's a big one. And maybe that's a nice segue also to some questions from the audience today for the last 20 minutes. So I'm going to see who I'm going to point it to, and then obviously both of you can chime in. But Stijn Jansen, thank you for your question, is actually asking this, right? Is the ROI only addressed towards the journey management tooling today? So therefore, is it about journey management at large, or just like, hey, how much do you pay for TheyDo, and is it returning on your investment in your case? Like, how do you think about it, Daniel? And then maybe Joana, you can speak broadly on how people think about
it. Yeah, just thinking about it, I think journey management without tooling, just maybe the other way around, I think it's not even possible. So that would be my super short answer. So that the ROI, I think the tooling is more the smaller part. I think probably the tool for the next couple of years we have already in basically with just one case. So I think it's really much more on the journey management itself. So not that it is the tool basically. I think it's really the smaller part.
Yeah. What do you see, Joana? Because obviously the journey management wave is comparing vendors, software vendors in this space, but I'm sure you got some broader catch on journey management at large.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one thing is, of course, you purchased a tool and you've implemented it, and hopefully you've gotten value out of it, right? That's one consideration. When we look at does the tool help you to measure the ROI of journey management, that is a completely different thing, right? There we're looking at the value that you're creating for the customer by removing inefficiencies, right? Are they able to do things first time round? Are you reducing frustration? Are you giving the customer more control? Are you helping them to complete their journeys? Well, the first question is, are you helping them to accomplish their goals, right? That is the value that we are looking to create for both the customer and for the company. A journey is essentially a customer on a path to accomplishing a goal. So the first thing we need to measure is, did they accomplish a goal? And did they accomplish that goal based on their definition of what the goal accomplishment is, right? So that doesn't mean when they've completed your form on the website. That means if they're looking to get a mortgage with you, it's when they actually complete that entire goal and they're able to move into their new home, right? So there's so much more that goes into that. So that's the first, if you like, value that we're looking to measure, really. But besides that, we're also looking at things, and a journey management platform should help you to also measure things like, were they able to do that in their preferred channels, and maybe in lower cost channels, with less switches, for instance, or less inefficient handoffs, which actually impacts also how much that journey costs you as an organization. So not just how effective was it for the customer, did it create emotional engagement, but also was it done in a way that is cost effective for you as an organization and that led that customer to potentially want to do more business with you. So in the end, did it drive retention, right? That's a really important thing that we're trying to measure. I think I saw a question about, how do we actually connect metrics to revenue generation? That depends on the journey. It depends on what revenue it drives. But you can look at it in terms of the accomplishment in the journey. Did you sell that mortgage? But you can also look at it in terms of, did you create a more loyal customer, for instance, that has gone on to do more business with you? That's an even longer term perspective on the ROI ultimately of that journey. So I think of it as you can tell, in a much more holistic way. And there's many different ways of using metrics to track the ROI of your journey management practice. And I really see it as a practice, right? A way of doing business, essentially. And the ROI is measured in different ways.
Yeah, there's a follow-up question that's related from Quinn W. Can we go into other metrics than the typical VOC NPS set that help us quantify the benefits of managing certain parts of the journey? And I think you spoke a little bit about it, but maybe what I want to underline, what I'm also seeing, and I'm hoping to get your perspective on this, is that there is not one metric for each journey that is similar, right? Sometimes there's like multiple metrics that do take into account the full context, saying like, hey, look, it's a whole digital journey of buying a car, and in the process you will get a financing for your car. Like there's all these like nuances in between, and the way you measure that is very different. Like overall there might be an NPS score that you survey at the end, but there's all these little steps in between. Like there's a customer effort score for like this particular part. Like how easy was it for you to do something? But when we think about that, is there a framework? Like, or maybe like, are there different types of metrics that help quantify the benefits of managing certain parts of the journey? That's the original question. So it's a big one, but maybe worth deep diving a little bit on. So
absolutely.
Love to hear both of your perspectives.
Is there a framework? Of course. You're asking me if there's a framework. Forrester has a framework for it.
All right, Joana will put the framework on the screen in a second.
So yes, I'm a big believer in, so there's two types of metrics you want to track for most journeys. And some may be consistent. You may be tracking Net Promoter Score for all of your journeys or CSAT for all of your journeys. But there should be what we call a framework or a system of metrics that measures steps in the journeys. So things that are happening in the journey, and are they happening effectively? Is somebody able to do it first time round or without frustration? So if I'm applying for a mortgage, that might be, was I able to submit all my documents without needing to resubmit or without any inaccuracies, for instance, right? That's a really important step in the journey that is very important to the customer because it ultimately impacts the timing of when they get that mortgage. But it also gives you a sense of, did that part of the journey occur successfully for the customer and also without any rework for us as a company? So there's a value for the customer, there's a value for the company there. And at the end of the journey, so we call those journey signals. You measure those at important milestones or steps in the journey, and they're very contextual to what's happening in the journey. So they can, by nature of that, not be the same for every journey. There might be similar ones that reoccur and you measure in the same way. You also want to measure what we call success metrics at the end of the journey. So accomplishment, did the customer achieve their goal? But also, did they achieve their goal in a way that made them positive about the experience, right? You might have a customer who achieved their goal, but is incredibly frustrated and will churn further down the line. That's obviously not a good situation. So we want to be measuring metrics like that, like goal accomplishment, like their perception of the journey, which you could be capturing through a survey, for instance, in a VOC platform. But you also want to be measuring things like what was the cost to you of selling a mortgage, right? Or was the cost to you of selling that car based on how many interactions you had with the customer? So the journey actually gives you the context for the metrics that are going to be most effective in measuring value for the customer and value for you as a company. On top of that, you may have a consistent metric like Net Promoter Score that you're measuring across journeys as well.
Daniel, do you want to add like some of your ways of quantifying the different metrics outside of like the typical CX metrics that you're using?
Yeah, I made some notes because we are really at the beginning and I'm looking for ways, or we are looking for ways, to go further NPS and CSAT. That's definitely a thing we also see. And I think, as you said, this is really journey specific. And we are at the beginning to really broaden, so to say, the metrics we want to get into the journey view, basically, also really to approach to include our data analysts more. So for now, it's really more on the qualitative things, also from this negative feedback tracker we have in place, which works, so to say, really with the amount of negative feedbacks and to see the development, so to say. And if we have key topics, super negative sentiment, basically, that we then, especially from a help and support side, can jump in or improve that so that we can provide better help. So I think this is definitely then something, but this is specific for the journey and for the help center teams, basically, that they have these metrics in place. And also, I think on a broader scale, and also, again, with our researchers, but the whole UX domain, basically, are now trying to get the Google's Heart framework into place more. So I think this is also something we have for quite some time already on the radar, and then especially in research also struggled how to get this in. And we see here with the journey management, and that that this might be another good point where we can try to bring it in and scale it really, and also to talk a bit more about these kind of metrics.
Can I add one more thing, Jochem, which
Sure.
I think is really important as well? Not all journeys are made equal. I don't know if you agree with me, Daniel, but there'll be some journeys that you have to maybe, be brilliant at the basics, right? They're a hygiene factor, right? I mean, a customer goes in for an oil change. I don't know how much you can wow them on a car oil change, right? But it needs to work clearly, otherwise the car is going to break down. There are other journeys that are, they're table stakes in the sense that you want to stay competitive, right, with others maybe in your peer group, because otherwise you're going to fall behind. And then there are other journeys that maybe you want to turn into a signature moment. Those are the journeys that you want to wow your customers on. Those are going to have very different metrics, very different ways of measuring what good enough is for each of those journeys. So there's a nuance there that I think is also super important when it comes, because nobody's advocating necessarily you have to improve every single journey indefinitely into, infinity and beyond, right? We need to be smart about this, right? What's our vision for each one of these journeys? And then we choose the appropriate metrics to be able to measure what our vision, what our ambition is, recognizing that some journeys we want to excel at, and other journeys, of course, they can't be broken. They need to work for the customer, but they're not where we're going to put all of our resources and attention on. So I think that's an important thing as well that I wanted to mention.
Yeah, thank you. I love that, because it's basically saying, like, it's really hard to say I have a vision for my feature, but I have a vision for this journey to materialize for my customer. Like, that's much easier to rally the troops around. And to your point, Daniel, like, not everything has to be a business metric, right? Having anomaly detection from all these like feedback places where you're collecting data from your customers, specifically in the journey context, knowing exactly where they occur, like, that's a huge win. Having that context, for otherwise saying like, people are getting more frustrated when they have lost bags, right? Okay, well, what should we do about that? I promise to get back to AI, and we have a heap amount of questions back on the docket. So I'll do both, because I think like one of the things that came up, which I'm curious to hear your perspective on, like, structuring that feedback, using AI to label and quantify, bring it into journeys. Like, I mean, that's well covered. It's important. But what I'm seeing is that once it's in that context and we layer on the business metrics, like, doing human analysis on that is quite complicated, right? You have to do time series data, you have to analyze and all these comparisons. Now we're putting AI on top of that. I know storytelling is getting mentioned in the Q&A. Maybe looking forward, like, where do you see this AI plus analytics to journey context go in the next year? Maybe Joana, you more on like what you think in market, and Daniel, you for what you want to achieve with the teams.
Do you want me to go first?
Sure.
So that is something that was very clear from the vision of a number of journey management vendors that we evaluated, but that I see more broadly in the market also when we look at journey orchestration, for instance, is that many, of course, have the aspiration and the ambition to become increasingly agentic, right? So in the future, we're going to have platforms that are really going to be almost like an assistant, right? With AI on top of it, being able to do lots more sophisticated calculations and analysis for us, and be able to also automate that to some extent, right? So if you look at the journey orchestration space, and journey analytics space, I think we're going to see even more agentic AI, right? Where certain things will be automated based on sort of the analysis and based on an understanding of what's going on in a journey for a specific customer, right? So that's where the future, I think, is going. I think that, in terms of what the AI can do now, it can increasingly provide better synthesis, right? So it can allow us to analyze a much larger volume of both structured and unstructured data, which was very difficult and very time-consuming to do previously, in a way that allows us to see insights faster, to see insights across journeys as well, so that we can see patterns as well, right? So that's huge from a prioritization point of view, from a synthesis point of view, in terms of finding the right problems to solve and the right solutions to solve those problems, but also from a storytelling point of view. So the ability to then then take that information and be able to tell a story that is going to resonate with my CFO, or that's going to resonate with my CEO, or that might resonate with my product team. That is also, I think, something that's going to give us a dexterity that we didn't have as CX professionals or product professionals or UX professionals, that I think is going to hopefully accelerate the pace at which we can do things. Because one of the problems that I sometimes see is we find this great opportunity in the journey, we quantify it, we try and get it moving, but by the time we've delivered on it, it's maybe become a little bit less impressive than it initially sort of seemed to be for the customer, right? So accelerating some of that action is also hopefully something that will be a byproduct of some of these changes that we're seeing.
What do you think about shaping this up, Daniel?
Yes, I would definitely agree also on the pace. So, I mean, this is for us, it's definitely the analysis part, what I just said here at the beginning, to really process more feedback data. So that this is definitely number one for us. That is a great help. We already used AI for analysis and in research, UX, of course, I don't know. And even if it's just on a Miro with Miro AI and sorting some stickies or using our internal co-pilot, make some sense of transcripts and stuff. So it is already used everywhere, basically. But really to have it in context with a little bit more of a visual, let's say a visual database behind. Yeah, because this is, so for us at the moment, we see, and especially in this context of processing more feedback and insights, so that we really, it's not a black box. It's not the black box like Copilot where we throw some stuff in and then we ask it something and it says, yeah, this and that are the top pain points here of these 20 interviews. And of course, so it is, it gives a little bit more the visual context, the journeys itself. We are basically in charge, bringing insights in, sorting insights, defining if it is really valuable or if it is really right understood by the AI, and then AI on top of this database. I think personally we have really more confidence in the answers the system gives. And I think this is then the second point for us, not only the pace, but that I also hope a lot that it will help us to connect to other stakeholders, especially in management and in decision making, that we have a good vehicle here to have this, so to say, this vertical storytelling and in AI to really bring it on point, to really look at the specific things the stakeholders are looking for in the journey maps. They don't want to scroll half an hour through a journey map to see why an opportunity is valid or backed by insights, but to really get this information fast and trustworthy, so to say, from that system. I think this is another key point for me personally, or I think also for our organization in general, a little bit the mistrust also on the one or the other information AI is giving to you.
Right. So you're saying it's like a two-prong approach. It's like synthesize the initial set of data, aggregating it, then in the context, bringing the rest, enriching it, and then it will provide more depth to your analysis. Time is going by really fast. I will use one more question and let's see if we can do it in a couple of minutes because it's a spicy one. And I picked it randomly, so really apologize for everyone for the questions we didn't answer. Maybe our team can go through and do a written leave behind after we put this episode live. So I think this question is for you, Daniel. How much does the org structure, this is Sayan, I hope I pronounced it right, asking this, how much does the org structure or where the journey management team positioned in the organization impacts the success of journey management and thereby proving the ROI? It's a wonderful question to wrap up. I'm sure you have a perspective on that. But tell us, enlighten us.
Oh yeah, that's a spicy one indeed. Yeah, so I think this is... of course, it depends definitely on the organization. And I think this also plays a little bit then in the way how you introduce it. We talked about this a couple of minutes ago, that you have this approach a bit more from the top coming, a little bit more bottom up. Ideally, you need both. And I think this defines a little bit also from the structure where your journey mapping team is sitting. So for us, it's in UX. So for us, it's naturally a little bit more from the bottom up, because we are coming, so to say, from a discipline, from a COP in our community of practice in our organization. But if your team is like placed in business development or somewhere else, I guess, so also when I just compared in our organization, that would be a little bit different. Yeah, I think there were another way of proving and also another way of introducing the journey management topic. So that's definitely, I think, dependent on the organization, where your team sits and how the organization is working. So for us, it's really this, and maybe this is also then it's always comes with the pros and cons. For us, it was a pro that we like on the basis we had this expectations of processing more insights, make more use of customer feedback, and not like, okay, how many tickets will we sell more with journey management? So I think that's also a benefit from where you're placed. But that's my answer in short.
Thank you. Joana, do you want to wrap us up with your perspective? I know org design is a big topic for you. Let me plug you here. Like, if people really want to go deep on their org, reach out to Joana. I mean, Daniel's also usually happy to answer calls. Maybe not now because of the busy Christmas times ahead, but next year for sure. Joana, do you have any additional points on this to wrap up our session?
Absolutely. So it's my most popular question, indeed, org design. So I spend a lot of time thinking about this and I saw there was a question about an operating model for journey management or journey centricity. This is something that we work with a lot of companies to help them build and that I spend a lot of time thinking about. But let me leave you with sort of two thoughts. One, we see journey management sort of pop up in different areas of the organization, right? So there isn't sort of like one sort of magic place that it needs to sort of be in the organization. I have seen an extremely fast transformation when it was the CFO who was responsible for journey management. So if you can get your CFO on board, that might be a golden tip there. But it can be the CX team. I've seen CX teams join up with others, right? The work needs to be inherently cross-functional wherever the team is located within the organization, right? And there's advantages, as you said, Daniel, to being in different parts of the organization. It depends on the strengths of your organization, the maturity, it depends on the ambition you have for journey management. The other sort of last thought that I would leave you is that it also it's not etched in stone. Right? So we see a lot of journey management teams that start in one place of the organization and then either move, change reporting lines, they expand, they contract as it gets more embedded within the organization. So it's also a moving target to some extent. So I am a big advocate for pragmatism and using what you have as strengths and also looking at where in the organization, who can you collaborate with that will amplify your efforts? If you have a Lean Six Sigma team that might be willing to use some of their green belt projects, for instance, to run journey experiments, why not? If you have a user-centered design team that you can partner with, why not use that strength to amplify your efforts? So think about it in that way, I think, would be my parting thoughts.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And ending on that pragmatic note, I mean, the topic du jour was the ROI of journey management. And what I'm basically hearing from both of you, and I hope many of you got that as a takeaway as well, is that the ROI usually means finding value in your organization where you can latch onto. I mean, journey management is an obvious decision for many in customer experience design, CX, service design. But finding value where you can latch onto, that's the real job. And then presenting that as ROI is the way the business perceives it as valuable. That's the starting point. And then maybe we can do this again in the next year and talk about the scale and the next level of results. Daniel, thank you so much for joining me. Joana, thank you so much for doing the whole community a great service of bringing the wave together and spending some time with us today. Thanks everyone at home, at the office. Any question that was left unanswered, let me get async feedback on them when we publish this webinar. And we will all hope to see you again fresh in the next time we speak. Thank you.